Now we're going to have a look at the last key knowledge dot point for Unit 3, Outcome 2. So before we start this, I just wanted to give you a little revision question. Which of these issues is not examinable for social debates? So what we mean by not examinable is which of these topics do they not assess you on come the exam? All right, and the correct answer there is biosecurity. Now, I just wanted to raise this one because this was actually used to be a couple of study designs ago. So if you go back to anything before 2018 and you start looking at some past exam questions, you will notice questions that students had to write about or could essentially assess students around biosecurity. So that's no longer within the study design, wasn't in the last one and is not in this one. So what we'll be doing is finishing off, like I said, Unit 3, Outcome 2, and we'll be looking at this fifth key knowledge dot point. Now, when we have a look at the key knowledge and key skills, a couple of things that we need to be aware of. Firstly, it's looking at the influence of social debates on relationships with outdoor environments, including one of. So you don't need to know all of these three. All right. If you see that if there's a question on this, you'll see all three of them listed on your exam, and that's no reason to freak out. You only need to know one of those. Again, if we go down to the key skill sits really nicely, I think, with what this area of the course is trying to achieve, and it's looking at that analyze the influence of these debates around these issues, whichever issue you've focused on relationships with outdoor environments. So again, thinking about cause and effect. Okay, so what is the debate around climate change, around water management, and then how do each sides of that debate influence relationships? So that's a good example of cause and effect. The cause being the debate, the effect being the influence on relationships. So this is what it used to look like previously. It had that social and political debates. So that had some implications for some questions on past exams where students need to be able to write about the social debates and the political debates. And also what it used to be is that students had to know climate change, water management, and renewable energy. Whereas that's changed now. So like we just looked at, we've now just reduced it to social debates because politics are part of society. And now we're just saying that schools need to look at one of those issues. In terms of past exam questions, there you go. That's where you'll see past questions on this. But again, just be mindful of the fact that whilst in some years some students were provided with choice, there are past exam questions where students were forced to write about one of those issues. So when you're doing that and you go back and do those questions, I don't want you to start doubting yourself. Maybe you could just edit that question to suit the environmental issue that you and your class have focused on. Some interesting past VCAR questions. So this is one from 2021, and this is where there was some stimulus material. Students had some choice here. And then what they needed to do with reference to the stimulus for the selected debate, so students needed to explicitly reference the quotes that we see up here, explain the current social and political debate that is occurring about the best use of Australia's natural resources. So in this bit as well, this is one of those questions where students need to write about the social debate and the political debate. We wouldn't have that now, but interesting where there's a bit of stimulus material for us to refer to here. If we look at another question, this was from the 2023 exam, and if you have a look at this question is really delving deep into renewable energy. So if you have looked at renewable energy at your school, I recommend going and doing question 9, which was the last question on the exam for the 2023 exam, because it's a good way that you could practice a lot of different aspects around renewable energy. So what are two types of renewable energy sources? Describe two different views, discuss how different political parties might view that proposal, and then analyze the impact of switching this pretend town, or this case study town, their electricity to 100% renewable will have on the residents' relationship with their local environment. So yeah, interesting question there. All right, so what have past exam questions around this topic asked students to do? Well, in summary, you've had to outline the opposing sides of the debate and talk about how each side of the debate can influence relationships with outdoor environments. and it's ranged from 5 up to 12 marks. So 12 marks is obviously a really high mark allocation, and that's where students are having to outline or describe both sides of the debate and then talk about how both sides of the debate can influence relationships. So yeah, big mark allocations is a potential here. All right, so social debates, like we said right at the start of this video, you only need to explore one of these below environmental issues. You don't need to look at all three. We're going to unpack each of these as we move through. So if you want to hit fast forward on my video, I won't be offended and just get to the one that suits you specifically. So we're going to start by looking at water management. So one way that you could look at the water management debate, and again, it depends on your context, but you could look at, I'm going to give you an example of looking at the Murray-Darling Basin. And there could be one side of the debate that thinks, well, yeah, we should use more of that water in the Murray-Darling Basin should be allocated to environmental water. And we should be making sure that those rivers and those wetlands and those ecosystems have more water in them. And that might be around concern because there's been some mass fish kills that have happened within the last sort of, I think like sort of 5 to 6 years. There's been 2 major ones. On the other side of the debate, you might have some people that think, well, more water from the Murray-Darling Basin should be redistributed for farming and agriculture. And that's because agriculture is a really significant part of our economy. So there's 2 sides of the debate. Now let's look at renewable energy. What are the 2 sides of the debate for renewable energy? Well, one could be society really needs to rapidly transition to renewable energy. Fossil fuels are going to run out and they're having negative impacts like climate change. On the other side, renewable energy is expensive and our economy depends on fossil fuels. So money is to be made from fossil fuels and that benefits Australia's economy. Like I said in a previous video, I think our largest exporter overseas that generates the most revenue for us in Australia is exporting coal, which is a fossil fuel. And then let's have a look at climate change. So again, you might have framed this a little bit differently if you've looked at climate change, and that's okay. I'm just giving you some options. So on one side, you might say, well, humans are responsible for climate change, and that's because of fossil fuel burning, leading to that enhanced greenhouse effect. On the other side, there might be some people that think, well, humans are not responsible for climate change. It's a naturally occurring process. There's natural variability, and we don't have enough data over a long period of time. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to then jump into some answers here, and we're going to look at how this question could be answered from a range of perspectives. So here in your booklets, if you go to question 13A, you've got a question that starts off by asking you to outline the 2 opposing debates of your chosen contemporary environmental issue. So let's have a look at climate change. So this answer, where it's getting marks, well, climate change is caused by humans. Around this releasing of greenhouse gases, burning fossil fuels, which traps heat into the atmosphere. That's one side of the debate. On the other side, so using some signposting, however, some people believe that climate changes are due to natural fluctuations and that humans have little to no influence on this. All right, that would definitely get you 2 out of 2 marks for that. Now let's go to 13B, analyse how these 2 opposing debates could influence relationships. So we've already done our cause, now let's go to our effect. Let's have a look at this. So a little bit of signposting in here showing effect. All right, so the view that humans are the main cause of climate change could influence relationships by encouraging people to have higher respect for the environment. They might make sustainable lifestyle decisions. And you've got some examples there. So using less energy, fewer cars, recycling, as they feel a responsibility to help address climate change. Conversely, so a little bit of signposting again, the opposing discourse or debate could influence contemporary societal relationships by leading people to believe there's no need to care for the environment. Thus, they may, another effect, continue to believe that climate change will happen regardless of what we do, so they're not going to attempt to reduce their negative impacts and try to reduce their ecological footprint. All right, and that would get you 4 marks there. Again, look at that structure. We see 4 sentences for 4 marks, and they're well-expressed ideas. Okay, now let's look at water management. Now, there's lots of different ways. I've used the Murray-Darling Basin. I'm going to keep going with this, but if you have a look at this, this just shows you all of the different stakeholders or different user groups, interest groups that want to use the Murray-Darling Basin. So you can see in here that we have the fishing top. I'm looking at the top left there. So fishing employing 10,000 people. We see it's home to 2.6 million people. We see more than 40 Aboriginal nation groups, peoples groups connected to this. We see 24 billion in agriculture. We also see that there are internationally protected wetlands. Some of you might have looked at the Ramsar Convention. Well, there's 16 of them that are there. 8 billion tourism dollar industry. So there's a lot of different interests here that are all competing to use the Murray-Darling Basin. So let's just have a look at how we might answer a question around this. And that's just going back to 13A. So I'm just giving you some answers that might work for you if you've looked at a different topic. So firstly, we see the Murray-Darling Basin should be used as environmental water. This is because people have concern. These areas have been negatively impacted by drought and overuse, and they think more water should be kept for that environmental flow. And we want to reduce those mass fish deaths and sustain biodiversity. On the other side, you've got people who think, well, no, we should use it for agriculture. It's a really important generator of jobs, but generator of revenue for Australia. We export a lot of our food. We're known for having really good food in Australia, and so we export a lot of that. So they think, well, we need to use this water to support livelihoods, support jobs, and without this resource and access to this water, they can't provide water to their livestock or their crops. So they think that it's essential for agriculture as it provides a large percentage of Australia's food supply. All right, now let's look at how those debates could influence relationships. So people who think water from the Murray-Darling Basin should be kept as environmental water believe that it's not a limitless resource and it should be protected from potentially harmful activities, such as overuse. As a result, they have increased levels of care and concern for the environment, and they think that species that rely upon that ecosystem should be preserved, such as the Murray cod. So that would definitely get you 2 marks there. Now let's have a look at the next paragraph. So if you're on the other side of the debate, you could believe the environment is an unlimited resource to be used for agriculture. Again, a bit of signposting. This view may, showing the effect, encourage lower levels of respect. And people have egocentric perceptions that are mainly concerned with profit and them benefiting. Okay, now let's look at renewable energy. So you could have one side, okay, society needs to transition to renewable energy. The threat of climate change is real. And the best way to tackle it is through initiatives such as solar and wind farms. On the other side, it's too expensive and we depend upon fossil fuels. There's a lot of costs involved with the initial setup of renewable energy stations, and currently fossil fuels are cheaper. Also, this mining generates millions of dollars for our economy, and this can't be compromised. So that could be the 2 sides of the debate, potentially for you to use around renewable energy, and that would get you 4 marks there. And then if you have a look at, okay, how do both of those debates influence relationships? So you can see it's signposted really well. So people who believe society urgently needs to transition to renewable energy could perceive. So we know that that's the debate we're talking about. We know we're going to get into a perception here. So they think the environment's in danger and it's in need of conservation. This could lead to different interactions that reduce carbon emissions. So that might be things like installing solar panels, supporting wind farms as people feel urgent actions required. On the other hand, signposting. People believe that renewable energy is too expensive, might perceive. So some really good signposting there. We know exactly where this answer is going to go. And they see the environment as a resource to be exploited for our own benefit. This can lead to continued fossil fuel use and being primarily concerned with short-term economic profits of using fossil fuels for energy production. All right, so there you go. That's how that one would influence relationships. And that's that key knowledge dot point done. So remember, the key skill here is analyze. So can you write about both sides of the debate? Again, you don't have to write them exactly like I laid them out. You may have looked at them in a slightly different way. That's okay. Do you have those opposing debates? And can you then talk about the effect on relationships? All right, well done. You've officially ticked off halfway and you've looked at all of Unit 3. In the next video, we'll start looking at Unit 4.